Imagine the government just coming in and taking your home because they need it. Sounds like something that happens in a country with an oppressive government, not in America. You might think the government taking your property would be unconstitutional, as the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution clearly prohibits unreasonable search and seizure. But the very next amendment, the Fifth Amendment, grants the government the power to take land for public use with just compensation. And for over 200 years now, to this very day, there have been court battles over their power and your rights. MeTV's Veronica Dudo takes a closer look at the government power of eminent domain.
Cities across the country have been using eminent domain to force people off their land. Through the process, the government can take private property for public use. Here in Philadelphia, a world-renowned artist is fighting back.
My story is a tragic one, but it's not alone.
Pittsburgh native James Dupree is a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania and the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts. He has traveled the world to create art, curate shows, and exhibit his masterpieces. His works are in the permanent collections of several museums abroad and featured in the Philadelphia Museum of Art and the African American Museum in Philadelphia. In 2010, Dupree was the recipient of the Living Legends School of Design Award from the University of Pennsylvania. Not long after, he received life-altering news. The deed to his property was taken because of eminent domain.
Now they have a law to take my free and clear deed, my property, 34 years into my 35-year dream studio, built with my own two hands, my own money, didn't ask anybody for anything.
Under the power of eminent domain, a state or national government can take private property for public use, which includes delegation to third parties who will devote it to public or civic use, or in some cases, to economic development. Here on Haverford Avenue in the Mantua section of the city, Dupree has built his life's dream, a unique art studio, museum, gallery, and residence. But now he could lose everything.
It has never been about the money for me. It has been about the principle that our city government would act so egregiously on taxpayers. I've worked really hard. I cannot build this again.
According to a spokesperson from the Office of Housing and Community Development, there are still plans in place for this area that would include a supermarket, which officials say is needed.
There is no supermarket developer or plans for one to happen at this location.
It's been a long battle for Dupree, who has dealt with depression and a stroke as a result of the legal dispute. As an artist, he has embraced his feelings to create art that represents his emotions.
The last 7 years of my life have been hell. You wake up every day living a life of uncertainty. The symbols are my pain and suffering. And that pain and suffering is for all those that cannot and do not have the means. This law kills people.
Currently, Dupree is still in litigation with the city and says he hopes officials will return his deed so he can again be the lawful owner of his property. In Philadelphia, I'm Veronica Dudo for MeTV.
All right, thank you, Veronica. Now I want you to meet Joe Danihel. Joe lost his home. How long ago?
I lost the house in 1994. I bought the house from the government in 1991.
So Joe lost his house that many years ago, more than 20 years ago, to eminent domain. And he has since been fighting for the just compensation that is promised to him in the U.S. Constitution. Let's talk about first how you came upon this house. How did you buy this house?
I saw the house in an ad as a handyman special, and I asked the realtor, and he said it's a HUD house. And I went, and checked everything out. I knew it was an area near the Logan area, so I went down.
And near Roosevelt Boulevard, right?
Yeah. And I went down to Logan Assistance, which was the government office down the street, and they said, no, they aren't taking your house, the house that you're looking at buying. And then I went back to the realtor. I talked to somebody who represented themselves from HUD, and I bought the house the way a normal person buys a house. It just needed a lot of repairs.
So you bought it for how much?
I bought the house for $6,000.
$6,000, and then you had to bring the house up to code. That was part of the agreement. How much money did you put into the house?
I put $20,000 worth of building materials plus labor, so it was about $35,000. I had to do all the roofs, 3 outside doors, about 40 windows.
So you're $41,000 into this house, and the house isn't just a single residence. It's a row home, and you were going to rent some apartments, right?
Well, I was going to live in 2 of the apartments, and I was going to rent the other apartment, and I had 2 storefronts on the side in the basement. It was an end of the row.
So you're thinking to yourself, I got a pretty good deal. I just had to put some time and effort into it. You had to borrow money to do this, and your life's going to be set because you're now going to rent the properties out, maybe start a business that's going to be out of there. This was not just a property. This was something that you were going to build a life around.
Right, and I even had a tenant.
And then they took it from you.
I even had a tenant. They paid my tenant to leave, but they still haven't paid me for the house.
What did they tell you when they took it from you?
Well, they didn't take it from me. They brought me down to Logan. They brought me down to Logan Assistance, and they made me an offer of 60 plus 20 relocation money. If I turned over the keys to them, they would pay me later. They said that if you pay the taxes and order bills, we'll reimburse you for them and your expenses and interest when we make settlement with you, because the government money's coming in bits and pieces. So I handed them the keys because the alternative was to live there with no water. They shut the water off to the neighborhood. So I really didn't have a choice, and I didn't want to stay and fight. I just wanted to get paid.
What do they want to do with your land now?
They want to build a shopping mall there.
And that's been pretty well publicized. That
three malls have been planned for the area.
So this is area that you were moved off of because it was
valuable.
Well,
to someone else.
It was considered unlivable too. You shouldn't build on it because of the soil, and that's why they move you out. And now they're going to build on it and invite people to come there. So what you believe, and you say it, not me. I want to put words in your mouth. They took your land because your land was valuable.
Correct, because there's government reports that show that the block I was on has no fill on it. I was 3 blocks from the creek. So if I was 3 blocks from the creek is going to eat. If you go in proportion, Delaware River is wider than that creek, then there should be no building next to Delaware clear up to City Hall if you want to go proportionate where you can't build near water. My house has no fill, and that's from the Lippincott study that was published in the paper that was paid for by the city. But they're taking it because they don't want bits and pieces in the middle of the land. They want a big triangular lot on Roosevelt Boulevard.
Right, because it's right off Roosevelt Boulevard. It's valuable property, especially if you run a business. For a shopping mall, it would be perfect, yet you should be getting compensation. And you are constitutionally, they have a constitutional responsibility to give you compensation.
Right. They should have to prove that I'm satisfied before they can change my title. And it's quite the opposite. They beat me up, stalked me, made me go into debt, everything else, and they haven't given me a dime, and yet they say this is constitutional, and I argue no, it isn't.
Well, I hope we can work it out. We're going to have an attorney and a real estate expert up next. We'll talk about your case a little bit. I hope somebody sees this, either from the city who feels the moral obligation to do the right thing, or an attorney that would take your case and for payment down the line.
Yeah, I've been turned down by the ACLU, and I've been turned down by, there's a lot of legal groups that take on eminent domain, and they've all turned down my case because they said they got mired in one of the Logan Triangle cases before, and the government is impossible to deal with in Philadelphia.
And yet, the basis of your story is inherently unfair. So I hope that somebody feels the moral obligation to help you. Thank you so much,
Thank
Joe.
you so much.
I hope this all works out for you. And we'll continue to talk about not only Joe's case, but eminent domain when we return on And Another Thing.